Hi, I'm Pam Callen, and this is the third workshop I'm doing in the Learn and Share program with North End Gallery here in Leonardtown. I'm happy to be back with you, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. The other two previous ones had to do with pastels, and today we're going to be dealing with acrylics, which I don't think you've seen much of in the previous Learn and Share programs. We're going to be doing a pet portrait, and I think it's a good technique. There are certainly other techniques, but I think it's a good one for beginners. I want to go over a little bit about the materials first, since you haven't had much exposure, if any, to acrylics during this Learn and Share series that you've had access to. Acrylics are a water-based paint. So of course are watercolors, but acrylics, they're more like house paint, so they're opaque. They're not as transparent as the watercolors. And the process is a good deal different. I also have so I have my watercolor paint, my acrylics, and I've purposely limited the palette so I don't have a lot of them with me. I've thought about what it is that I'm going to paint, and I suggest you do the same so you're not carting around absolutely every color that you own. It's not a good way to be terribly mobile. I also have some watercolor pencils with me, and I'll explain why. I have some regular pencils and an eraser. I probably won't use them. There's nothing wrong with using them if you want to, for the purpose we're going to talk about. If you do that, then we have our handy dandy cheap hairspray that we use to fix that before we start painting on the surface. The advantage to using watercolor pencils is that they are water-based. And so as we do our grid, and we're going to use a grid today, as we do our grid and as we start to paint over the grid, if we use watercolor pencils, they will blend right into the water-based paint, and that is the advantage. They do show up nicely as well. We have our brushes. My favorite, and the favorite of most probably painters of any sort, is the 1-inch flat. It's useful for painting this way or any old way. This is a rake. You can't see it terribly well unless you look very closely. It's a fan brush, but it's also a rake. And the thing about the rake is it has little spaces between the tips of the brushes, so that you get a very feathery finish when you paint with this. And since we may be doing fur or feathers, that may be a nice brush for you to have in your arsenal. I have a nice little round here that we can use perhaps. I have some other rounds that we're going to be pulling out as we need them. And then this is called a line brush or a rigger. It's called a rigger because a lot of times in watercolors or acrylics, or oils I suppose, it's a very thin, very long brush, so you can do rigging on a sailboat with this brush. It's also a line brush, which is nice for signatures. Very thin lines. We can use this for our fine work that we're going to be doing. I have my water container, of course, my paper towels, always useful for all kinds of painting, my apron to protect my clothes. And the thing about acrylics is they will ruin your brush if you allow the acrylics to dry. The same is really not true of watercolor. You can reconstitute the watercolor in the brush and you'll be all right. If you allow acrylic paints to dry in your brush, you will be forever sorry. I also have a little palette knife, little plastic palette knife, to help me mix colors. And I'm going to start to show you the technique that I use now. Oh, the support. Of course you want a reference photo. This is not a terribly good photo. The purpose of using this photo is that it has the puppy's contour, what we call the contour, which is really the outline of the animal in space. That's really all we're talking about here. I have a better version of that same photograph on my iPad. The reason I have a Xerox copy of the photograph, or just one that's printed off on regular copy paper, is because I can mark this up with a grid. The grid will then be transferred, transferred to the larger canvas. This is called a support. It can be paper, it can be a canvas, it can be whatever you're painting on, whatever you happen to be using to paint your painting on. So I'm going to do the grid, but here's what we need to do to measure to make sure that our grid is going to work, that we can transfer our grid and therefore the contour of the animal onto our support. We're going to hold the photograph up against the support here, and we're going to go across in the diagonal. And as you can see, well, maybe if it will be more obvious to you if I do it this way. This is a 9 by 12 canvas. I don't know how large this photograph is. If we go point to point on the canvas, you can see that there's part of the photograph that hangs out over here. In order to transfer the grid and have the correct proportions, we have to bend this or mark it up, but I prefer bending it so that all of the points line up, so that when we again go across the canvas from point to point, all of the points line up properly. And only then will we know that the grid will work. And the reason for the grid is to make sure animals are contorted in all kinds of strange ways. You can see that this puppy is lying down. He's got one paw out. He's got all these strange things going on, and it's very difficult to capture freehand. So we're going to grid this off, and we're going to grid this off, and then we're going to transfer the contour, and we're only going to worry about one block at a time, and that way we will be successful in transferring our contour. So I'm going to start working on this, and this is going to be kind of boring, so I'm going to draw a couple of lines, and then maybe we can take a break and speed it up or something. We'll see about that. I think I'm going to use a grid of I'm going to have one in the middle, and then I'm going to have that halved, and then I'm going to have one in the middle going this way on both surfaces, and then I'm going to have that as well, and then we're going to go from there and get our contour in. And then we'll talk about the rest of the steps once we complete that process. So bear with me now, and I'm going to draw some of the lines, and it's easy to do on the paper, and that's why I want you to have a Xerox copy, something you don't care about, that you can mark up or fold or whatever it is you need to be doing in order to get your grid. The other advantage to the watercolor pencils is they come in different colors. So in a black and white photo, which is I have, and this is a black and white dog anyway, so it would be difficult, even if this were a color photograph, to keep track of where the dog is in space. But with a watercolor pencil, I've got a yellow line that I can see very easily. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to fold it again. I'm going to draw another line. There is some simple math you're going to have to do in order to get the grid on here from here. But I'm going to review that when the time comes. So don't worry about any of that. And don't freak out about your math skills, okay? We're going to get past all that. If we do this right, I can almost guarantee success. Because this is the boring part of it. But it's essential. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to put this aside. I'm going to take this now. We don't need to go across. I will go. Let's see. All right. So now we're going to start to set up the grid on our support. And we've got, I guess, 16. What do we got on here? 8. Yeah, 16 squares on here. Equal squares. Or rectangles, whatever they are. But we're going to try to do the same. We're going to duplicate that on our support. And so since we've got 16 of them, and we started by halving it and drawing lines halfway across. This is 9 by 12. That means it's going to be 6 inches from the edge. The first line is going to go there. That's halfway across that way. We're going to go this way. We're going to go, it's 9, so it's going to be 4.5, right? We can handle this math. It's not a big deal. 4.5, we'll do that. We've got this adjusted, remember, so that we are going to match up when the time comes. We're going to then go 3 inches on either side. 3 inches and 9 inches. So that we have our grid taking shape here, and that's going to allow us to try to capture this cute little puppy. And we're going to go from 4.5 to 2. Let's see, 2 3/8, I guess, or something like that. No, it's 2 1/4, 2 1/4, and 2 1/4. 2 1/4, 2 1/4. And then we're done. We've got our grid. And even I can figure out the math on this, so I'm sure that I have every confidence that you can. There we are. So this is our little guy right here. And as I said, we're going to worry about one frame at a time. I do have a better iPad picture here that I'm going to be working from only for the details. But right now, what I want to do is get this stuff out of the way. I'm going to keep one thing. Let's see. I'll make his contour in some other color here, maybe just the gray. Maybe we'll use the gray. And if you look at the first square, whatever that is, there's just a little tiny piece there. I'm going to the second square, and it really comes about, 2/3 of the way up across there. And there's a little bump, and he has some fur and stuff. And then we go to the next square here, and I'm only worrying about one square at a time. You can do this with anything, and I often use this. If I'm painting a person and the person is leaning over and I want to make sure that I get those proportions correct, I do the same thing. But you can do this with wildlife. You can do it with wild birds if you have a nice shot of a wild bird. So here we are. We've got, it's coming down. It's coming down about 2/3 of the way across this next one. And then there's a little bit of a piece there. Remember, we're just worrying about the contour, just the outlines, the animal's outlines. Okay, so we're going to continue on. I've put the picture up here so it's more convenient for us. I'm going to come down here and toward this ear, and see, we don't think of it, when you're doing this, you don't have to think of it as an ear. You can think of it as just a shape, and then you're off the hook. You don't have to worry about capturing the animal completely carefully that way. And it's about halfway through this next grid, if you look at it. Then we come down here, his little face comes in almost at a 90-degree angle for really about halfway. And then he comes down here like this, and his nose just comes a little bit, may have to make an adjustment there, a little bit into here. And he comes about halfway up there, and then his little face comes this way. There's a paw also that comes down, and it just peeks out a little bit, comes this way, and then down about halfway down in this one. And again, we're not worried about any details just yet. We'll get all of those later on. We've got a tail that comes down this way. We've got another little paw that comes right almost on top of that tail. It comes down this way. And we've got his little puppy belly that shows up just right at the top of this and comes all the way down and hooks up with this paw right there. Except, let's correct that a little bit. Oh, here's the other advantage to watercolor pencil. You can erase it. Just like that. Isn't that fun? And then it's gone. So his belly comes right in here like this. And there's his puppy belly. So I'm going to stop there. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start to work on the background. And the reason that I do that at this point is I just want to make sure that we simplify the background, and we're going to try to enhance the animal. That's our job here. This painting is not about the background. We don't have to include any of the busy stuff that's going on back there. We can maybe leave his little bone there, or his little ball toy here. We'll put some kind of a little toy here maybe. But we don't want to be a slave to the photograph and put absolutely everything that's in that photograph in our painting. It doesn't need to be there. What we're doing is we're going to make sure we enhance the animal. I would like to have some warm colors and some cool colors. This is a black and white little dog, so what we're going to have to do is I want to have some maybe we'll put him on a rug or a basket or something, but we'll have maybe we'll make the basket a little bit warmer color, so I'll just put that in around him, and his little paw sits right on the edge of that. And again, we're gonna fill this in and have some nice colors on there, because I want him to be the star of the show here. And this comes down near this. Actually, this ear goes right up over the edge of that. And so we're going to have that. We're going to have that show that way. And that it's sort of like that. Yeah. Okay, so we'll erase some of this too. Yeah, that's okay. All right, so I think I'm going to make the background blue, a bluish color, even though it's not that way in the photograph. Again, we don't have to be a slave to the photograph. So I'm going to start with I'm going to start with the extreme outside, and I'm going to start to squeeze out some paint now.